Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. So, where are you watching it from? And what are you doing right now? I hope you enjoyed this story. Tonight, we enter a land of rolling green hills, where time seems to move a little slower and the air is thick with the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers. In this peaceful corner of Middle-earth, we find a hobbit named Samwise Gamgee, whose heart is as pure as the Shire itself, yet whose path will soon lead him into the very heart of darkness. But fear not, for this tale is one of quiet courage, of small choices that carry great weight, and of hope that rises, no matter how dark the night may seem. As you listen, let each word carry you deeper into the story, the warmth of the fire, and the gentle hum of a world full of both light and shadow. So, take a deep breath, relax, and let the adventure unfold, one peaceful step at a time. Let Samwise's journey remind us all that even in the quietest moments, there is strength, there is hope, and there is always a path forward, no matter how uncertain it may seem. And now, as the world outside fades away, let the story begin. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the rolling hills and lush green fields of the Shire. It was the kind of evening that seemed to stretch forever, a peaceful moment in the life of Samwise Gamgee, who was walking along a familiar path near Hobbiton. His thoughts wandered as he plucked a few wildflowers here and there, planning to present them to Rosie Cotton when he returned home. The air was thick with the scent of fresh grass and the faint perfume of blooming flowers. Birds sang softly from the trees, and the gentle rustling of leaves created a symphony of nature's peace. Everything seemed perfect in the Shire, and Sam, ever the humble hobbit, was content with this simple, tranquil existence. As he wandered deeper into the fields, the path began to narrow, the open land giving way to thick hedgerows and twisting vines. Sam, always eager to explore even the smallest corners of the Shire, pushed through the dense greenery, not minding the occasional branch scratching at his face. It was on this quiet, solitary walk that he stumbled upon something unexpected. There, half hidden by ivy and moss, was an old well, its stones weathered with age, its wooden structure barely standing. Sam had never seen it before, and it intrigued him immediately. He crouched down, brushing away the leaves and vines to get a better look. The well was small, no more than 3 feet across, and the stones seemed ancient, worn smooth by years of exposure to the elements. The well had a deep, mysterious quality, and there was something about it that drew Sam in. He leaned over the edge cautiously, peering into the depths below. The water was unusually still, almost unnaturally so, and its surface gleamed with a glass-like sheen. As Sam gazed into the well, he could feel an odd pull, something beyond curiosity, something that whispered to him from the depths. He didn't know what it was, but a strange feeling crept up his spine. The air around him seemed to grow stiller, and he became aware of the faintest of sounds. It was a whisper, low and distant, but somehow clear as day. Sam stood up straight, his heart beginning to race. "Who's there?" he muttered, his voice carrying only a little in the quiet of the evening. But there was no answer. Only the whispering sound, as though the wind was caught in the well's dark depths, rising and falling with a rhythm that felt too deliberate to be natural. For a moment, Sam thought of walking away, chalking it up to the idle imagination of a hobbit alone in the fields. But something held him there, an invisible force that tugged at his very soul. The whispering grew louder, clearer, and now he could hear words. They were faint, like a voice calling out from the distance, but the words weren't quite clear enough to understand. "Look deeper," the voice seemed to say, just above a whisper. "See what lies ahead." Sam's brow furrowed in confusion. "See what lies ahead?" he echoed quietly, his heart hammering in his chest. What could that mean? He had lived in the Shire all his life, and nothing strange or extraordinary had ever happened here. It was a simple, quiet life. There had been the great adventure of Frodo and the Ring, of course, but that was a story for the history books, a story for another time. Now, here was Sam, a simple gardener, standing before an ancient well that seemed to possess some unnatural power. He leaned over the edge again, staring into the water, willing it to reveal its secrets. But nothing changed. For a moment, there was only the soft rustling of the trees and the sound of distant birds. The quiet seemed to stretch out into eternity until the whisper returned, louder this time, clearer and almost beckoning. "Look deeper," the voice urged again, "see what lies ahead." Sam's mind raced. What was this? What kind of magic was at work here? And why did it feel as though it was speaking directly to him? It wasn't like any spell he had encountered before. It wasn't the kind of thing you found in Hobbit tales or the stories of the elves. But this wasn't just any well. Something about it, something about the stillness of the water, told him that he was standing on the edge of something vast, something important. He took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he placed them on the rough stone rim of the well. Then, with a mix of trepidation and curiosity, Sam bent down closer to the water. He could feel the coolness of the stone beneath his fingers, the chill of the earth surrounding him, but it was as if the world itself had stopped. The rustling leaves, the distant chirp of birds, all of it faded, leaving only the sound of his breathing and the soft, insistent whisper that still beckoned him. Sam's reflection stared back at him from the water's surface, but something else was there as well. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the reflection was not his own, but that of someone else, a figure that looked vaguely familiar. It was a hobbit, yes, but one with a look of worry in their eyes. Sam blinked and shook his head. Was this some sort of trick? But before he could fully understand what was happening, the reflection shifted again, and this time he saw a vision of the Shire itself. It was peaceful at first, just as it had always been. The rolling hills, the patchwork fields of crops, the hobbit holes nestled into the hillsides like cozy little homes. Everything was bathed in the soft light of evening, a picture of serenity and tranquility. And then, suddenly, the vision changed. The peaceful landscape darkened, the skies clouded over, and the familiar hills and houses were overtaken by shadow. Sam felt a chill crawl up his spine as he watched in disbelief. The Shire, his home, was under siege. Fires burned in the distance, and hobbits ran in panic through streets filled with chaos. There were shadows, dark, menacing figures that moved through the town, their faces hidden beneath hoods or masks. Sam's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the destruction unfold before him, unable to look away, unable to stop the flood of images that seemed to pour from the well. "Who are they?" Sam whispered, his voice trembling. But the whisper from the well had no answer. As quickly as it had come, the vision faded, leaving Sam staring into the water, his breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. He straightened up, backing away from the well. The air around him felt suddenly thick, heavy, as if the very earth itself was holding its breath. What was that? Sam muttered to himself, his heart racing. The vision of destruction, the fire, the shadows, none of it made sense. It was too far from the peaceful Shire he knew. But what had he just seen? What did it mean? The whispering faded, and the stillness returned, leaving Sam with only the sound of his own breathing. His thoughts swirled in confusion as he glanced around, half expecting to see someone, perhaps Frodo or one of his friends, emerging from the trees to tell him that it was all just a dream, some strange trick of the mind. But no one appeared. There was no one there but him and the ancient, silent well. Sam took a few steps back, still staring at the well as though it might offer him some answer. But the water was once again calm, reflecting nothing more than the sky and the trees above. It was as though the vision had never happened at all. Still shaken, Sam turned and began walking back toward Hobbiton. But the thought of the well lingered in his mind, and the image of the Shire in flames burned into his memory. What had he seen? And what did it mean for the future of his home? As he walked, Sam knew that the peaceful life of the Shire, the life he had always known, might not remain so peaceful for long. The future seemed uncertain, and the strange, unsettling vision had left him with more questions than answers. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something dark and dangerous, and he had a feeling that he might not be able to stop it alone. For now, he would keep the vision to himself, not wanting to worry anyone. But deep down, Sam knew he would have to find out what the well's whisper meant. Because if it was a warning, he wasn't sure he could ignore it. And if it was a vision of things to come, he had a feeling that the Shire would need all the courage he could muster. The wind seemed to shift around Samwise as he slowly walked back toward Hobbiton. The evening's serenity had been shattered by the vision that had appeared in the well, something he couldn't ignore, a vision of his beloved Shire in flames. The image haunted him, the faces of his fellow hobbits running in fear, the shadowy figures that loomed ominously. His thoughts swirled around the terrifying image as he walked, but even as the familiar paths of Hobbiton came into view, the whispering voice of the well echoed in his ears, urging him to look deeper. Look deeper, it had said. See what lies ahead. Sam had never been a hobbit to believe in magic or strange powers. He was a simple gardener, more comfortable with the rhythms of planting and tending to his vegetable patches than with anything that might be called unnatural. But this was different. This ancient, crumbling thing had shown him a vision that felt too real to be dismissed as a mere trick of the mind. What had he seen? Was it a warning? A prophecy? Or perhaps it was just a fleeting glimpse of a future that was not set in stone? He couldn't tell, and that uncertainty gnawed at him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the vision wasn't just a dream. The well had spoken to him, and Sam had heard it clearly. It wasn't the kind of voice that belonged to any ordinary creature, nor did it belong to any of the wise folk he had met over his travels. No, it had been the voice of something older, something ancient, whispering from the depths of time itself. As Sam neared his home, the comforting sights of Hobbiton, the soft curve of the hills, the cozy hobbit holes nestled into the hillside, the little gardens bursting with flowers, did little to calm the unsettling feeling that had settled deep within him. He had seen the Shire, yes, but it was a place unfamiliar to him, a place ravaged by chaos and destruction. Was it a warning of what was to come? Sam didn't know. But what he did know was that he could no longer pretend that everything would be all right. Something dark was on the horizon. He reached his garden and knelt down beside the neatly tended rows of vegetables, his hands instinctively moving over the soil as he tried to find some grounding. The simple act of caring for his plants, something that had always brought him peace, couldn't calm his mind now. The whispering voice still lingered in his thoughts, urging him to understand, to look deeper, to see what lay ahead. Sam didn't know what to do with the troubling vision. It was hard to make sense of it, even harder to know how to act upon it. The hobbits of the Shire were a peaceful folk, known for their love of good food, good company, and simple pleasures. There had been the darkness of the Ring War, of course, and Sam had fought bravely by Frodo's side. But that was years ago, and now, in this peaceful corner of Middle-earth, it seemed impossible to believe that any kind of danger could befall them. And yet, the well had shown him a different future, one of fear, of destruction, of shadows closing in on the heart of the Shire. Sam could not ignore what he had seen. That night, as Sam sat down to a quiet dinner of vegetables from his own garden and a bit of cheese, his mind kept drifting back to the well. It was an old thing, certainly, its stone rim cracked and weathered with age. But there was something about it that felt timeless, almost as if it had been there long before Sam's ancestors had ever set foot in the Shire. What was its purpose? Why had it shown him those dark visions? Could it be that the well had been trying to warn him of something only he could stop? He wasn't sure, but the thought of sitting idly by while his home, his beloved Shire, faced some unknown threat made his blood run cold. Sam had always been one to take action when something needed doing, even when the odds seemed impossible. Perhaps he wasn't the most skilled or knowledgeable hobbit when it came to grand matters, but he had learned a great deal from his journey with Frodo, about courage, about friendship, and about standing firm in the face of overwhelming darkness. The next morning, as Sam woke early to begin his day, he found himself still turning over the events of the night before in his mind. The voice of the well still echoed in his ears. Look deeper, it had said. See what lies ahead. But what was he supposed to see? What had the well meant? Sam decided that he would return to the well. He could not just forget about it. It had shown him something troubling, something that hinted at a future he couldn't quite comprehend. If he wanted answers, if he wanted to understand what was happening, he had to go back. It wasn't long before Sam found himself walking the same path through the Shire, his heart a little heavier than before. The familiar sights of the fields and the rolling hills did little to ease his mind. His thoughts were filled with the whispering voice, the images of the Shire in flames, and the looming shadows he had seen creeping over the land. What had he witnessed in that well? Was it a dream? Or was it a glimpse into a possible future? When Sam reached the well once again, he found it just as he had left it, its surface still and calm, its ancient stones untouched by time. But this time, he did not hesitate. He stepped forward, kneeling down next to the stone rim. The air was still, and the faintest sound of the breeze stirred the leaves in the trees around him. The well seemed to breathe, as though it too were alive, waiting for Sam to look within. He leaned over the edge once more, peering into the water. The reflection was his own, just as it had been before. But this time, something was different. The water shifted as though it were rippling from an unseen disturbance below. Sam felt a strange pull, a sensation that beckoned him closer, urging him to look deeper still. As he stared into the depths of the well, the water began to shimmer, and the vision appeared once again. This time, it was clearer, more detailed. Sam saw the Shire, his beloved Shire, bathed in sunlight, just as it had always been. But something was wrong. The skies were too still, the air too heavy. The field stretched out in every direction, empty and desolate. He saw the homes of the hobbits, their doors ajar, their windows dark and empty. It was as though the land itself was holding its breath. And then, just as before, the vision shifted. The skies darkened, and the land was thrown into shadow. Sam saw hobbits running, their faces filled with terror. Smoke rose from the distant hills, thick and black, and the homes of the hobbits were being destroyed. He could hear the sound of crashing, the roar of flames, and the cries of his people. The shadowy figures he had seen before, dark, menacing creatures, moved through the streets, their eyes glinting with malice. Sam's breath caught in his throat. It was the same vision he had seen the day before, but now it felt more real, more tangible. The destruction was real. The danger was real. The whisper came again, soft and insistent. "Look deeper," it urged. "You must see what lies ahead." Sam's heart pounded in his chest. He leaned closer, trying to understand, trying to make sense of the scene unfolding before him. The Shire was being torn apart, but why? Who were these shadowy figures? Why were they attacking the Shire? Suddenly, the vision shifted once more. This time, the scene was different. Sam saw himself standing in the middle of a battlefield, surrounded by destruction. The hobbits of the Shire were there, too, fighting with all their might, but the odds were overwhelming. The darkness was closing in, and the very ground beneath their feet seemed to be crumbling. Then, through the chaos, Sam saw a figure, one he recognized all too well. It was Frodo. But this Frodo was not the bright-eyed hobbit he remembered. He was older, his face etched with worry, his eyes haunted by the weight of something dreadful. The vision shifted again, and Sam saw Frodo standing alone in the center of the battlefield, holding something in his hands. It was the One Ring. The vision ended abruptly, and Sam found himself gasping for breath. The world around him seemed to return to normal, but the weight of what he had just seen lingered. The well had shown him something, a vision of the future, perhaps, or a warning. But the darkness was real, and it was coming for the Shire. Sam slowly rose to his feet, a heavy silence surrounding him. The world of the Shire seemed unchanged, peaceful, as it always had been. But in his heart, Sam knew that peace could not last forever. Something was coming, something dark, something dangerous. And it was up to him to uncover the truth, to protect his home, and to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As he walked back to Hobbiton, Sam knew that the well's whisper had not been a mere dream. It was a call to action. And whatever lay ahead, he would be ready. The days following Samwise's return from the old well felt both long and uncertain. The Shire remained the same, its fields lush and green, its skies bright and open, its inhabitants going about their simple, everyday lives. But for Sam, nothing was the same anymore. The vision of destruction, of shadows closing in on the heart of his home, gnawed at him, and the whispering voice of the well continued to echo in his thoughts. He had seen things, terrible things, that seemed impossible. The Shire, the place he had always thought of as the most peaceful, safe corner of Middle-earth, would not remain untouched forever. His heart ached as he thought of the hobbits who lived here, of Rosie and their future together, of the quiet, contented life he had always believed in. And yet, deep within him, he knew that something dark was coming. He didn't know when or how, but the well had shown him a future of shadows and fire, and he couldn't ignore it. Sam had tried to keep his fears to himself, tried to convince himself that perhaps it was just some strange trick of the well, a glimpse of a possible future that would never come to pass. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw the burning villages, the running hobbits, the shadowy figures that had haunted him in the water. Every time he walked through Hobbiton, the laughter of children and the chirp of birds felt somehow hollow, as if the quiet peace of the Shire was fragile, on the brink of something dark. And so, after days of restlessness, Sam made a decision. He would go to someone who might understand. He would go to Gandalf. The wizard had been a key part of his life years before, during the dark days of the War of the Ring. Though the war was over, the memory of those dark times had not fully faded, and Gandalf was the only one Sam knew who might have the wisdom and knowledge to help him make sense of the strange vision. If anyone could guide him, it was Gandalf. And so, Sam packed a small bag, took a last look at the Shire that he loved, and set off toward Rivendell. It was not a short journey, and Sam knew it would take several days, perhaps even weeks, before he reached the home of Elrond, where Gandalf could likely be found. But he could not ignore the sense of urgency that pulsed within him. The vision from the well was a warning, and Sam knew that it was only a matter of time before the darkness would begin to creep across the land. If he did nothing, if he stayed idle in the comfort of his garden and the peace of his home, it would be too late. He had to act now, before the shadows took root. The journey was long, and Sam had not traveled outside the Shire since the war. At first, the roads were familiar, windy paths through green hills and over babbling brooks, but as he ventured farther from home, the landscape changed. The hills grew steeper, the forest denser, and the path became less well-marked. Sam had always enjoyed a simple life, but now, on this journey, he felt something stir inside him, an old, buried sense of adventure. It was the same feeling he had experienced long ago when he had left the Shire with Frodo and embarked on the greatest adventure of his life. And yet, this was different. The path ahead was unclear, the destination uncertain. In some ways, it felt as though Sam was walking into the unknown, guided only by the whispering voice from the well, urging him to look deeper, to seek answers. Was this his destiny? To face some new darkness, some new threat to the Shire? He didn't know, but he had to try. As the days passed, the weight of the journey settled on Sam's shoulders. His legs grew weary from the long walks, and the nights were cold and lonely. There were moments when he wanted to turn back, to return to the warmth of his hobbit hole, to the safety and comfort of the Shire. But each time he thought of the vision, the burning Shire, the frightened hobbits, the shadowy figures stalking the land, he couldn't turn away. His love for the Shire, for its people, drove him forward. There was no turning back now. On the 5th day of his journey, Sam reached the foothills of the Misty Mountains, and the land became increasingly wild and untamed. The road grew steeper, and the trees thickened, their branches intertwining to form a dense canopy overhead. The air grew colder, and Sam found himself wishing for the familiar warmth of Hobbiton, the soft earth of his garden beneath his feet. But he couldn't stop now. He was closer than ever to Rivendell, to Gandalf, to finding the answers he sought. One evening, as Sam made camp beneath the shelter of a large oak tree, the winds began to pick up. The sky grew darker, and a chill ran through the air. The temperature seemed to drop suddenly, and Sam shivered, pulling his cloak tighter around his shoulders. He had traveled this far without incident, but now, something felt off. It was as though the land itself was watching him, waiting for something. Sam paused, listening carefully. There was an eerie quiet, a silence that pressed in on him from all sides. The usual sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves, were absent. Only the wind remained, howling through the trees like a distant cry. Suddenly, a movement caught his eye. Sam turned quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for the small knife he had packed. Through the trees, a shadow moved, a tall, thin figure, cloaked in darkness. For a moment, Sam froze. Was it just the wind playing tricks on him? Or was there something more sinister out there in the woods? The figure did not come closer, but instead lingered at the edge of the clearing. Sam's heart pounded in his chest, and he could feel his breath quicken. His mind raced with possibilities. Could it be one of the shadowy figures from his vision? Had the darkness already begun to creep into Middle-earth? For what felt like an eternity, the figure remained motionless, its presence an eerie stillness in the night. Then, without warning, it vanished, as silently as it had come. Sam stood still for several moments, his body tense, his eyes scanning the forest for any further sign of movement. But there was nothing, just the wind, the rustling trees, and the growing sense of unease that gripped Sam's heart. After a long while, Sam exhaled slowly, his hand easing away from the knife's hilt. There had been no sign of danger, no immediate threat, but he could not shake the feeling that something had been watching him, something that was not quite natural. With a nervous glance toward the darkened forest, Sam resumed his preparations for bed. The encounter, brief as it was, had shaken him, but it had not been enough to stop him. He had a greater purpose now, a destiny, perhaps, that he could not ignore. And so, with his mind troubled but resolute, Sam lay down beneath the stars, hoping that the morning would bring clearer answers, and that the strange figure in the woods was nothing more than a figment of his imagination. As he drifted into a fitful sleep, Sam could not help but wonder whether the darkness he had seen in his vision was already beginning to seep into the world, whether the shadow that haunted his dreams was moving closer, bit by bit, toward the Shire. His journey had only just begun, and already the signs were beginning to show. Whatever lay ahead, Sam knew he could not face it alone. And though he walked the road alone for now, he would need to find allies, friends who would stand with him against whatever threat the future held. The road to Rivendell stretched before him, but the shadow of doubt loomed just beyond it. Sam pressed on, knowing that his journey had only just begun, and that the answers he sought could change the fate of the Shire forever. The path to Rivendell grew more difficult with every step, the terrain becoming less forgiving as the days passed. Samwise's boots were caked with mud, his cloak heavy with the weight of the persistent drizzle that fell from the gray sky. The misty mountains loomed ahead, their peaks veiled in mist, their jagged cliffs and sheer walls seeming to mock his steady progress. Yet, Sam pressed on, his resolve only strengthened by the vision he had seen in the Whispering Well. His heart, though tired, remained steadfast. He was doing this for the Shire, for his home, his friends, and his family. For Rosie. The journey had taken its toll on him. His legs ached from the constant uphill struggle, and his hands were calloused from gripping the rough, damp rope of his back. The air was thin here in the higher elevations, and he found himself catching his breath more often than usual. But through it all, there was something else, a sense of peace. Perhaps it was the natural beauty of the land around him, the rugged hills and dark pine forests that seemed to stretch out in every direction. Despite the danger that lay ahead, Sam found a certain calm in the wildness of the place, a tranquility that was hard to come by in the Shire. He had always loved the peace of home, But this was something different. Here, in the solitude of the mountains, he felt closer to the heart of Middle-earth, to the raw essence of the world that had birthed him and all the hobbits. It was late afternoon on the 6th day of his journey when Sam reached a particularly steep incline. He had been following the path as best as he could, but the weather had grown unpredictable, with clouds quickly rolling in and the wind picking up. The sharp gusts of wind cut through the air, carrying with them the chill of the mountains. Sam stopped to rest, finding a sheltered outcrop of rock where he could catch his breath. His legs trembled with fatigue, and he could feel the ache in his shoulders from carrying his pack so long. He rested against the rough stone, eyes closed, and took a moment to collect himself. It was then that he heard it, distant, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakable. A low growl, like the rumble of thunder, seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath him. Sam opened his eyes, his heart skipping a beat. The growl sounded again, louder this time, accompanied by the harsh sound of scraping rocks. Sam's gaze darted around, but he saw nothing. His senses heightened. His hand instinctively went to the knife at his side. For a moment, all was still again. Sam remained motionless, listening carefully. The wind had calmed slightly, but there was something unnatural in the air now. The growl had been far too close, far too real to be ignored. Suddenly, the earth beneath him trembled once more. This time, the ground shuddered with a great force, sending rocks tumbling down the mountainside. Sam leaped to his feet, panic setting in. What was this? A landslide? Or something worse? His eyes darted about, searching for any sign of danger, but the landscape was silent, too silent. Then, from around the bend of the mountain path, something emerged from the mist. It was large, too large for any creature Sam had encountered before. Its shape was shadowed, massive, its eyes glowing a faint red. Sam's heart pounded in his chest as the creature stepped into view. It was covered in dark, matted fur, its long claws digging into the rocky earth with a terrifying screech. It looked like some great beast, part wolf, part bear, but with an unnatural gleam in its eyes that chilled Sam to the bone. The creature's growl echoed through the mountain pass, a sound that seemed to reverberate in the very air around him. Sam's breath quickened. There was no doubt now, this was no ordinary animal. This was a creature born of darkness, a thing twisted and malevolent. He could feel its malice radiating from it in waves. Sam's mind raced. What could he do? He was far from any help. His only weapon was a small knife, hardly enough to defend himself against such a beast. His only hope was to avoid it, to find a way out before it could close in on him. He turned and scrambled up the rocky incline, his legs burning with exhaustion, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature followed, its heavy footsteps shaking the ground as it gave chase. Sam's thoughts were a blur as he clambered over rocks, his arms trembling with the effort. But he did not dare look back. He could hear the creature's growls growing louder, its pursuit relentless. With every step, Sam felt the weight of the mountain closing in on him. The path ahead became steeper, more treacherous, but he had no choice but to keep climbing. He heard the sound of the creature's claws scraping against the rock, its heavy breathing growing closer. Sam's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't outrun it for long. As he neared the edge of the path, Sam spotted a narrow ledge above him, just wide enough for him to scramble along. He made a split-second decision, pushing himself forward with all the strength he could muster. His fingers brushed against the rock, finding purchase, and he pulled himself up, his legs nearly giving way beneath him. With one final heave, he reached the ledge and rolled onto it, just as the creature lunged at him from below. For a moment, Sam lay on his back, panting for breath. His heart thudded in his chest, and his limbs ached from the effort of climbing. He did not dare look over the edge, but he could hear the beast's growls below. It was pacing, circling the ledge, waiting for its chance. Sam knew he couldn't stay here for long. The creature would not give up. It was only a matter of time before it found a way up to him. His eyes scanned the ledge, looking for some means of escape. The mountain stretched ahead, and though the path was narrow, there was a faint trail winding its way toward a higher plateau. If he could make it there, perhaps he could outrun the beast, or at least find a better vantage point. With a deep breath, Sam pushed himself to his feet. He glanced down at the creature one last time. It was still there, just below him, its glowing eyes watching, waiting for him to make a move. But Sam didn't hesitate. He turned and, with every ounce of strength he had left, he sprinted along the narrow ledge, his feet slipping on the wet stone, his body moving in a blur of instinct and sheer will. The wind whipped at his face, and the cold air bit at his skin. But Sam did not stop. He focused only on the path ahead, on the faint hope that he might escape this creature and continue his journey. The growls from below faded as he pressed onward, the sound of the creature's pursuit growing more distant with each step. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sam reached the plateau. He collapsed against the rough stone, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had made it. He had escaped. But as Sam lay there, staring up at the sky, his mind remained focused. He had narrowly escaped death, but he had not finished his journey. The path ahead still stretched on, and he could not afford to be distracted. The creature, whatever it was not the true threat. It was only a reminder of the dangers that awaited him on this journey, the dangers that had already begun to stir in Middle-earth. With a final glance at the fading mist below, Sam picked himself up, his legs aching and his heart heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead. His quest was far from over, and the Shire was still in peril. The road to Rivendell would not be an easy one, but Sam knew now, more than ever, that he could not afford to turn back. The darkness was closing in, and he had to be the one to face it. For the Shire. For everyone. And so, with a weary but determined heart, Sam pressed on. The mountains were an unforgiving place, their craggy peaks and sheer cliffs offering little comfort to the lone traveler who dared to venture through them. For days now, Samwise had been climbing, scrambling, and navigating the jagged paths that wound up the slopes of the misty mountains. His legs burned from the exertion, and his lungs struggled to draw in the thin air. Yet, despite the physical toll, he felt a strange sense of determination, even peace, in his journey. Every step he took brought him closer to his goal, to Rivendell, where Gandalf was waiting, or at least where Sam hoped to find answers to the visions that had so troubled him. The creature that had stalked him through the mountains was still a vivid memory, its growls echoing in Sam's mind whenever the wind howled through the passes. It had been a close call, but Sam had managed to evade it, to escape its grasp by a hair's breadth. And though he had pressed on after that terrifying encounter, the shadow of the beast haunted him. It was a reminder that the world beyond the Shire was a place of danger and darkness, a world that Sam had never truly known until now. Yet even as he worried about what might still lie ahead, he knew that he had no choice but to keep moving forward. He had seen the darkness in his visions, and he couldn't turn away from it. As he continued along the narrow, treacherous path, the weather took a turn for the worse. The sky, which had been clear just hours before, was now covered with thick, swirling clouds. The air grew colder, and the wind picked up, biting into Sam's skin as it whipped through the gaps in the rocks. The temperature dropped swiftly, and before long, snow began to fall, light at first but soon accumulating in a heavy blanket on the ground. Sam paused for a moment to pull his cloak tighter around him, his breath misting in the frigid air. He had been hoping to reach Rivendell before nightfall, but it was becoming clear that the weather would not cooperate. He had no choice now but to find shelter for the night. Turning back toward the mountain path, Sam searched for a place to rest. He had not seen any sign of other travelers or inhabitants in these parts. The misty mountains were vast and empty, a wilderness that seemed to go on forever. And yet, in the midst of the wild and untamed land, Sam felt an undeniable sense of something greater, a sense of ancient power. The mountains had been here long before him, and they would be here long after. He was but a small speck in the vastness of the world, and yet his task felt more significant than anything he had ever known. He soon found a small cave tucked into the mountainside, just large enough for him to huddle in and shelter from the growing storm. It was damp inside, but it provided some protection from the wind and snow. He gathered some dry brush from the surrounding area and started a small fire at the entrance of the cave, the flames flickering and crackling in the cold. The warmth from the fire was a relief, and Sam stretched out his weary limbs, grateful for the moment of rest. As he sat by the fire, Sam took out the small portion of food he had left, some dried bread and cheese, and ate it slowly, savoring each bite. He wasn't hungry, exactly, but the need for sustenance seemed almost secondary to the quiet comfort he felt from the fire's glow. It was a small moment of peace in the midst of the long journey, a moment where he could allow himself to breathe and think without the constant weight of the road bearing down on him. His thoughts wandered back to the Shire, to the peaceful days spent in Hobbiton. He remembered the smell of fresh bread baking, the sound of birds singing in the trees, and the familiar hum of hobbits going about their daily business. It was all so simple, so unremarkable, yet so precious. He remembered Rosie, her smile, her laughter, the way she made him feel like the luckiest hobbit alive. In the quiet of the cave, with only the fire for company, Sam could almost feel her presence beside him. He longed for the comfort of home, the safety and warmth of the Shire. But that was not to be his fate. His fate, it seemed, had led him here, to these lonely, dangerous mountains, where he would face whatever lay ahead in the hope of protecting all that he held dear. But no matter how much he longed for home, Sam could not forget the vision he had seen in the Whispering Well. The well's dark prophecy had shown him a future filled with shadows and ruin, a future where the Shire, the place he loved more than anything, was destroyed. The terror in the hobbits' eyes as they ran through the streets of Hobbiton, the smoke rising from the rooftops, the darkness spreading across the land, it was a vision Sam could not shake. He had to stop it. He had to do everything in his power to prevent that future from becoming reality. As the fire crackled, Sam's eyes began to drift shut, the exhaustion of the long day catching up with him. But just as he was about to slip into sleep, he heard it, the sound of footsteps outside the cave. Sam's hand shot to the hilt of his knife, and his heart began to race. Had the creature from earlier found him again? Or was it something worse, something far more sinister? He stood up slowly, his muscles stiff from the long journey, and peered out into the falling snow. The storm had thickened, the snow now falling in heavy flakes that obscured his vision. The footsteps were faint, but there was something about them that felt different from the noise of the mountain itself. These were purposeful steps, deliberate and steady. Someone, or something, was coming toward the cave. Sam strained his ears, listening intently. The wind howled, drowning out most of the sound, but he could still hear the footsteps drawing nearer. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, and his breath quickened. He had been alone in these mountains for so long that the thought of encountering another traveler, or worse, an enemy, filled him with a mixture of dread and curiosity. And then, just as he was about to call out, the figure emerged from the swirling snow. It was a tall figure, cloaked in dark fabric, with a hood that obscured their face. Sam's hand tightened on the knife, but he did not make a move. The figure stopped just at the entrance of the cave, their presence commanding yet oddly serene. "I did not mean to startle you, young hobbit," the figure said, their voice soft and almost melodic, carried on the wind. "The storm is fierce tonight. May I seek shelter in your cave?" Sam hesitated for a moment, his mind racing. This was no ordinary traveler. There was something ancient in the figure's voice, something that resonated deeply within him. Sam lowered his knife slightly, though his suspicion remained. "You are welcome to stay," Sam said carefully, his voice cautious. "But who are you, and what brings you so far into these mountains?" The figure took a step closer, their hood still shielding their face. "I am but a traveler, much like you," they replied. "I too seek answers, but my journey is one of a different nature. I have heard whispers on the wind, whispers of a great darkness rising, a shadow that stretches across the land. Perhaps our paths are not so different after all." Sam stood still, studying the figure. There was something in their words that sent a chill through him, a reminder that the shadows were indeed growing long and that his journey was far from over. "Come," the figure said gently. "Let us share this shelter for the night. Tomorrow, we may find the answers we seek." Sam nodded slowly, feeling the weight of their words. The storm outside raged on, but inside the cave, the fire flickered brightly, offering a brief respite from the cold and from the unknown dangers that lurked in the world beyond. The storm outside raged relentlessly, the howling wind tugging at the edges of the cave as if trying to tear away its fragile sanctuary. Sam stood at the entrance for a moment, eyeing the stranger who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. The figure, cloaked in shadow, moved closer to the firelight with an elegant grace, their footsteps soft on the damp stone of the cave floor. Sam's heart was still racing, the flickering flames casting erratic shadows on the walls, and he found himself studying the stranger more intently now that they were within reach. The figure was tall, taller than any hobbit, even taller than most men. Their cloak was dark, made of a fine, almost ethereal fabric that shimmered slightly in the firelight, giving the figure an almost otherworldly presence. The hood remained low over their face, obscuring most of their features, but Sam could sense that the stranger was not a common traveler. There was something ancient about them, something far older than the earth itself. The figure's voice was low and calming, carrying a weight of knowledge that Sam could not yet fully comprehend. "The storm grows fierce," they said softly, their voice reverberating through the cave with an almost musical quality. "But storms, in their way, bring clarity." Sam glanced back at the storm, the blizzard now swirling in a thick, impenetrable curtain outside. He was both relieved and wary of the stranger's presence. This traveler had no doubt come for shelter, but their words and demeanor gave Sam the distinct impression that they had far more to offer than mere conversation. Sam felt a subtle pressure building in the air around him, as though the very atmosphere had shifted since the figure had appeared. "Clarity?" Sam echoed, his voice hesitant. "I can hardly think clearly with all this wind and snow howling outside. But what brings someone like you all the way up here in the mountains? Not many would wander through these passes, especially in weather like this." The figure moved closer to the fire, their cloaks swirling slightly with emotion. "Sometimes, the mountains call to those who seek answers." Their voice was like the murmur of the wind, soft but deliberate. "And there are many questions to ask, even in places like this. Your path is not unlike mine, Hobbit." Sam's brow furrowed. "My path? I don't know what you mean. I'm just trying to get to Rivendell, to warn those who might listen about what I've seen. You wouldn't understand." Sam felt the frustration welling up again, the weight of his mission pressing against him. The figure paused, their eyes glimmering in the firelight as they slowly lifted their hood. For a brief moment, Sam felt an overwhelming surge of awe, a deep sense of recognition, as though the very sight of the stranger was pulling him into some timeless, forgotten space. The face that emerged from the shadow was pale, but not in a way that made it unnatural. There was a serene beauty to it, ethereal, almost otherworldly. Their eyes, however, were what drew Sam in. The eyes were deep, endless pools, shimmering with knowledge that seemed far older than anything Sam had encountered in all his years. "You have seen it, haven't you?" the stranger asked, their voice calm but laced with a quiet intensity. "The darkness that threatens your home, the Shire. The shadow that rises, hidden from most. You've seen it in the whispers of the well." Sam's heart skipped a beat. He had never told anyone about the visions, not even Frodo. The well's prophecy had been a private burden he carried with him, a shadow that hovered just out of sight. How could this stranger know? "How do you know that?" Sam demanded, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife at his side. The figure raised a hand in a gesture of calm. "I do not mean to cause alarm, young Hobbit. I have traveled much further than you could imagine, across lands and realms that most would never dream of. I have seen things, heard things. The Whispering Well is not just a relic of your world, Samwise Gamgee. It is a tool of foresight, a way for those with the gift to glimpse what lies ahead, and to see what is already unraveling." Sam's jaw tightened at the mention of his full name, but he did not speak. Instead, he sat down slowly, the warmth of the fire against his skin reminding him of the many hours he had been walking, the pain in his legs and shoulders, and the weight of the prophecy that now hung heavy on his heart. The figure continued, their eyes glowing faintly with a light that seemed to emanate from within. "You are not just any hobbit, Samwise. You have been touched by something greater than your own understanding. The well showed you a glimpse of the future, but what it did not show you is that the future is not set in stone. The darkness that you saw, it is not inevitable. It can be fought, but only if you understand the nature of the power that threatens it." Sam shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say. I don't understand. I've seen the Shire in flames, people running, hobbits screaming, and his voice broke slightly. I have to stop it. But how? I'm just a gardener. What can I do against something like that? The stranger's gaze softened, and for the first time, their voice took on a tone of empathy, something human, even familiar. "You are more than you think, Samwise. You have the strength of your ancestors within you. The heart of the Shire beats in your chest, and that is a power far greater than any darkness that may rise. You do not fight this battle alone. Others will come, and together you will face what cannot be faced alone. But first, you must learn to trust in yourself. Trust in your courage." Sam swallowed, feeling a lump rise in his throat. He had never thought of himself as brave, never thought of himself as anything special. He had always been content to stay in the Shire, tending to his garden, caring for his friends, and living the quiet life of a hobbit. He had never desired greatness. And yet, now, everything had changed. His world, his simple, peaceful life, had been shattered by the prophecy, and now, the weight of the world seemed to rest on his shoulders. How could he bear such a responsibility? The strangers seemed to sense his inner turmoil. "I know it is hard," they said, their voice soft. "You are young, and this is not the life you envisioned. But you must understand, every choice you make has meaning, Samwise. And your choices will shape the future of not only the Shire but of all Middle-earth." The silence between them stretched on for a long moment. Sam sat, his eyes fixed on the fire, his thoughts swirling. He could hear the soft crackle of the wood, the wind howling outside, and the presence of the stranger beside him, watching him, waiting. Sam felt the weight of their words settle into his bones, heavy but not unwelcome. The stranger had given him something to hold on to, a sense of purpose. A sense of hope, however small. Finally, after a long pause, Sam spoke again. His voice was quiet, but there was a note of determination in it now. "I don't know what's coming. I don't know how to stop it. But I'll do what I can. I have to. For the Shire. For everyone I love." The figure nodded, their eyes steady and filled with something like approval. "That is all anyone can ask of you, Samwise Gamgee. That is the true measure of courage, not the strength to fight, but the strength to keep going when the way is dark and the odds are against you." As the storm howled outside, and the fire burned brightly in the cave, Sam felt, for the first time in a long while, a glimmer of hope. He was not alone. There were those who believed in him, and though he might not understand all the answers just yet, he knew one thing with certainty: his journey had only just begun. The fire flickered and crackled as the two figures sat in the cave, their shadows dancing on the stone walls. The wind howled outside, but in the cave, the warmth of the fire offered a brief moment of respite from the storm's fury. Samwise had never felt such a strange mixture of unease and calm. The figure, this mysterious traveler, seemed to know far more than they let on. There was a presence about them that Sam could not quite understand, but it drew him in all the same. The storm outside was relentless, the snow piling up at the entrance of the cave and the wind rattling the walls. Yet, inside the cave, the fire burned brightly, its warmth comforting but also isolating. Sam shifted uncomfortably, casting a glance toward the figure, who had settled into a quiet stillness, gazing into the flames. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The crackle of the fire was the only sound, broken occasionally by the gusts of wind that cut through the mountain passes. Sam had expected to feel some sense of comfort, knowing that the mysterious traveler was there with him, sharing the same shelter from the storm. But instead, he felt an unease creeping into his mind, an unsettling feeling that gnawed at him. You said that the darkness can be fought, Sam ventured after a long silence, his voice quiet, but carrying the weight of his thoughts. That it's not inevitable. But how? How can something like that be stopped, especially if it's already spreading? I saw what the well showed me, the destruction of the Shire. The fire, the smoke. How do I change something that's already coming? The figure, who had been lost in their own thoughts, slowly turned toward him. Their gaze was steady, and their eyes seemed to pierce through Sam, as if they could see into the depths of his soul. For a moment, Sam wondered if he was merely imagining it, if perhaps the firelight was playing tricks on him, but the sense of being seen, truly seen, remained. It is true that you cannot change the future, the traveler said softly. But you can change the course of events that lead to it. You can stop the cycle before it spirals too far. Sam shifted uncomfortably. The idea was comforting, but it seemed too simplistic. How could he, a gardener from the Shire, possibly have the power to prevent something so vast, so far-reaching? His mind flashed back to the vision, to the helplessness he had felt as the fire consumed the fields and homes of his beloved Shire. The hobbits fleeing in terror. The despair in their eyes. The deep, oppressive darkness that threatened to swallow them all. But the darkness is already here, Sam said quietly, his voice filled with doubt. I saw it, plain as day. It's already begun. The shadow is creeping across the land. There's nothing I can do to stop it. The figure's gaze softened. The darkness you saw is not the whole picture, Samwise. You saw part of the future, a moment in time when the forces of shadow gain a foothold. But that is not the end of the story. Sam stared into the flames, his thoughts racing. The fire was warm, comforting, but the flickering light seemed to dance mockingly in the depths of his doubt. How could he change the course of events when he had no idea where to begin? He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't even someone who had ever wanted to be any of those things. He was a simple gardener, someone who found joy in the quiet, everyday life of the Shire. But the vision he had seen, the destruction, the fire, the suffering, it was impossible to ignore. Then what am I supposed to do? Sam finally asked, his voice cracking under the weight of his uncertainty. What can I do? The figure stood up slowly, the shadows of their cloak moving with them. The firelight flickered, casting a momentary haze around them, but they seemed to shine with an inner light that Sam couldn't quite comprehend. The answer is not in the destination, Samwise. The answer is in the journey. You must learn what you are capable of, not in the grand battles, but in the small choices you make. That is where the true power lies. The future is shaped by those who are willing to make the hard decisions, no matter the cost. Sam felt a stirring in his chest, a strange mixture of resolve and confusion. But I don't know what to do. I don't know what choices to make. I'm just a hobbit. What if I make the wrong choice? What if I fail? The figure's eyes softened with a kind of knowing compassion. There are no guarantees, Samwise. No one can see the future clearly enough to know every step. But you must trust yourself, and you must trust those around you. The Shire is filled with brave souls, even if they do not know it themselves. And sometimes, it is the smallest of us who carry the heaviest burdens. Do not underestimate what you can do. Sam remained silent, his mind whirling. The figure's words were not what he had expected. He had thought that the answer to the dark vision of the Shire lay in some great battle or some powerful action. He had imagined that there would be a clear path, a moment when everything would come into focus and he would know what he needed to do. But the figure's words suggested something far more subtle, something far more difficult. Trusting himself? Trusting those around him? The weight of the responsibility was beginning to feel suffocating. Sam closed his eyes for a moment, his thoughts drifting. He thought about Frodo, his best friend and the one who had always stood by his side. He thought about Rosie, the warmth of her smile, the way her presence made everything feel safe. He thought about the hobbits in the Shire, people who had always lived simple lives, content with the quiet rhythms of their homes and gardens. They were not warriors. They were not adventurers. They were just hobbits. And yet, the darkness that threatened them was coming for them all, whether they were ready or not. But could they be ready? Could Sam truly protect them? Could anyone? The figure seemed to sense his inner turmoil. You are not alone in this, Samwise. No one is truly alone. You will find allies along the way. Some will come from unexpected places, others from those you hold closest. But you must not lose sight of the most important truth, that even in the darkest times, there is always hope. Sam's eyes snapped open at the mention of hope. His mind flashed back to the vision in the well, to the burning fields, to the fear in the hobbit's eyes. He wanted to believe in hope. He wanted to believe that there was a way to save the Shire, to save his friends, to stop the coming darkness. But how could he do it when he didn't even know where to start? Hope, Sam repeated softly, as if testing the word on his tongue. I want to believe in it. But sometimes it feels so far away, like it's just out of reach. The figure stepped forward, their eyes filled with a deep, ancient wisdom. Hope is not something that can be grasped in a moment, Samwise. It is something that grows, nurtured by the choices we make, the actions we take, no matter how small. It is in the heart of a hobbit who plants a garden, in the courage of a friend who stands by your side, in the quiet moments when you choose to believe that there is something worth fighting for. Sam's chest tightened. The figure's words were like a balm to the wound of his uncertainty, soothing his fears but also stirring something else, something deep within him. Could it really be that simple? Could hope truly be found in the small things, in the quiet choices made by simple folk like him? The figure nodded, as though they could sense Sam's thoughts. Yes, Samwise. You are not alone, and you are stronger than you know. The road ahead is long, and the darkness may seem insurmountable, but you will find the strength to face it. In yourself, and in those you love. Sam stood up, his legs stiff from the long hours of sitting, but his mind was clearer than it had been in days. There was still fear, still doubt, but there was something else now, too, something that felt like hope, as fragile as it was. Thank you, Sam said softly, his voice quiet but sincere. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, but I'll try. I'll try to do what I can. The figure smiled, a brief, knowing smile that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. That is all anyone can ask of you, Samwise Gamgee. And with that, the storm outside raged on, but inside the cave, a new determination began to take root in Sam's heart. The fire in the cave had long since died down to embers, casting a soft, warm glow across the walls. The wind outside had calmed, and the snowstorm had ceased its furious assault on the mountain pass. The night, though cold, seemed quieter now, more still, as if the world was holding its breath in anticipation. Samwise Gamgee sat quietly, gazing at the remnants of the fire, his thoughts racing, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. The figure who had guided him through the long hours of the storm was now silent, seated across from him, their presence a calming force in the quiet cave. Their words had settled deep in Sam's soul, stirring something within him that he had never felt before. A sense of purpose, yes, but also the lingering weight of uncertainty. The journey ahead was still unclear, and Sam knew that the path he must walk was fraught with challenges he had yet to comprehend. But for the first time in a long while, he felt the stirrings of something more than fear within him. Hope. The stranger, this ancient traveler, had given him much to think about. They had not promised victory, nor had they offered false assurances. But they had shown him something far more precious, the strength that could be found in even the smallest of choices, in the quiet determination of one who was willing to stand up, even when the odds were against them. The figure finally broke the silence. "The road ahead is long, Samwise," they said softly, their voice low but filled with a quiet certainty. "And it will not be easy. There will be times when you will doubt yourself, when the weight of the world will feel too much to bear. But remember this, you are never alone. The choices you make, the actions you take, will shape the world around you. And no matter how dark the night may seem, there is always light to be found, even in the most unexpected places." Sam nodded slowly, the words sinking into his heart. It was strange, this feeling he had. Part of him still longed for the simple life of the Shire, for the peaceful days spent tending to his garden, for the comfort of his home and the warmth of Rosie's smile. But deep down, Sam knew that he could not turn away from the darkness that loomed over Middle-earth. The vision had shown him a future that was no longer just a distant possibility. It was coming, and it was coming fast. "What if I can't do it?" Sam whispered, his voice almost lost in the stillness of the cave. "What if I fail? What if the darkness comes, and I'm not strong enough to stop it?" The stranger's gaze softened, their eyes full of a deep understanding. "The future is not set in stone, Samwise. You may not have all the answers now, and the road may seem uncertain. But every action you take matters. Every choice you make will shift the balance, even if you do not see it right away. And even in the darkest times, there is always hope." Sam shifted uncomfortably, rubbing his hands together as he stared into the fading embers. It was hard to imagine hope in the face of such overwhelming odds, especially when the threat felt so distant, so insurmountable. But he had learned, in the past few hours, that hope was not something that could be seen all at once. It was something that grew slowly, like a seed planted in the earth. Small at first, but with time, it could bloom into something strong, something resilient. He thought about his journey thus far, the choices he had made. From the moment he had left the Shire, his life had been irrevocably altered. The quiet, peaceful life he had once known seemed like a distant memory now, something that belonged to a different person altogether. Sam had changed, and the world around him had changed, too. But even in the face of such uncertainty, he felt something stirring within him, a determination to protect his home, to protect those he loved. He could not let the darkness take the Shire, not without a fight. "I'll try," Sam said at last, his voice steady. "I'll do whatever I can. I won't let it happen." The figure nodded once, as if they had known all along what Sam's answer would be. "That is all anyone can ask, Samwise." The future is uncertain, and the challenges you face may be beyond anything you've ever imagined. But you are not alone. There are others who will walk this path with you. And together, you will find the strength to face what comes. Sam rose to his feet, his body stiff from sitting for so long, but his mind clearer than it had been in days. The weight of the journey ahead still pressed upon him, but it was not as heavy as before. There was something in the stranger's words that had lit a spark within him, a spark that, while small, felt strong enough to carry him forward. He glanced at the figure once more, who was now standing as well, their cloaks swirling gently around them in the soft breeze that had begun to stir within the cave. There was a sense of finality in the air, as if the time had come for them to part ways. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Sam asked quietly, almost as if he didn't want to know the answer. "The storm's past. You'll be going now." The figure gave a small, knowing smile. "I have traveled far, Samwise, and my path lies elsewhere. But your journey is just beginning. Remember what I have said, it is not the great battles that win the war, but the small choices we make every day. You will find your way, Sam. Trust yourself. And never forget the strength of the Shire within you." Sam nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude for the strange traveler who had given him so much in such a short time. They had shared wisdom, yes, but they had also shared something more important, the belief that he was capable of facing what lay ahead. It was not the way of the future that would define him, but the way he chose to carry it. As the figure turned to leave, Sam's heart surged with a sudden impulse. "Wait," he called out, his voice catching in his throat. "Thank you. For everything." The figure paused at the entrance to the cave, their back to Sam. "There is no need for thanks, Samwise. You are the one who will do the hardest work. I am but a guide on the path. The rest is up to you." With that, they stepped into the cold night, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Sam standing alone in the cave. The storm had passed, but the weight of the future remained heavy on his shoulders. Still, as the firelight flickered in the dark, he felt a sense of resolve deep within him, a quiet but unshakable certainty that he would not face the journey alone. Others would come. He would not be left to face the darkness by himself. Sam stood there for a moment longer, staring out into the night. The world beyond the cave was dark, yes, but it was also full of possibility. He had seen the worst of the future, and he had seen the glimmer of hope that could change it. And though he still had so much to learn, Sam knew one thing for certain: he would do whatever it took to protect his home, to protect the people he loved. For the Shire. For his friends. For himself. With a final glance at the stars above the mountains, Sam turned toward the path that lay ahead. It would not be easy. But he was ready. And now, as the last embers of our story glow softly in the quiet night, it is time to let go of the day's worries and sink deeper into rest. Let Samwise's journey remind you that even in the darkest of times, there is always light, small moments of hope that guide us through. As you close your eyes, may the peace of Middle-earth fill your heart, and may your dreams be as calm and comforting as the gentle breeze that whispers through the Shire's green hills. Rest now, for the night is long, and tomorrow holds new possibilities. Let your mind wander to places where courage blooms in quiet hearts and where every step taken brings you closer to finding your own strength. You are never alone, just like Sam, and your path, no matter how uncertain, will always be lit by the quiet hope within you. Sleep well, Dear listener, let the world drift away, and in the stillness, may you find the peace you seek. Good night.